Hello and welcome. It's me. It's you. We're all here. And boy, have I got a new theory for y'all today. Holy crap. I've been thinking about the Ironborn an awful lot lately. I've been eating, drinking, sleeping, swimming Ironborn. I have always known that the Ironborn world building and mythology was the most complex for whatever reason, even though they seem sort of tertiary to the main plot, although they are not. I should hold this for my Deep Ones video, but I can't. It's too exciting. I've got to give it to you now. Aeron got Patchfaced. So yeah, Aeron Damphair, the drowned priest, Aeron Greyjoy of the Ironborn, drowned at sea a few years ago, and his personality completely changed. And I took a look at it, and I think he was Patchfaced. Look, Patchface was drowned and resurrected by the Deep Ones. I don't know what y'all think happened to him, but he was drowned and resurrected by the Deep Ones. And I think the same thing happened to Aeron Damphair. And that means, because, you could tell, like, Patchface is obviously getting psychic intuition from somewhere under the sea. That means all the crazy stuff that Damphair says is not just crazy stuff. That is psychic implantation by the Deep Ones. He is a mouthpiece for the Deep Ones. If Damphair got Patchfaced, then that means, folks, the Deep Ones may have been doing this to drown priests for centuries and eons, and it means that the Deep Ones, aka the Squishers, have probably been steering Ironborn religion and culture for the entirety of its existence. Dun dun, that's the TLDR. Now let me prove it to you. So I'm going to give you this theory in the next 10 to 20 minutes or so. I'm going to outline it, give you the proof, and then we're going to read the first Damphair chapter so that you can see what I'm talking about. So once we have the theory in our heads and we read his chapter, you'll see like just how friggin' insane he really is. He has been Patchfaced. So that's what we're doing today. This is going to be mad. It's going to be absolute madness. This theory is true. This is not tinfoil. I promise you I will convince you by the end of the stream, and then it will lead to an actual idea and a conversation. And I'm sorry Grey Waste Tim can't be here. He's on vacation, just dying. Hopefully he's listening to me this and dying, Tim. How dare you go on vacation? This is what I do as soon as you turn away. New Deep Ones theories. Of course, I've been talking about all this with Grey Waste Tim. Go subscribe to Grey Waste Tim's channel. You guys know the kind of quality content he's bringing. All of this Ironborn Deep One stuff I've been rolling out. I've been workshopping with Tim and with my manager, Maynard James Plum. So shout out to both of them. But let's get into it, guys. First, let's talk about the story of Patchface. The first thing is, people have always thought that Patchface represents the truth behind the Ironborn drowning ritual, right? Like, that much we know. The Ironborn are pretend drowning people. They are kind of drowning people and resuscitating them, like in the Abyss. It's not magic. It's like you could theoretically do this to people, probably causing small amounts of brain damage, potentially. Not like the Ironborn seem brain damaged or anything. I mean, that's hearsay and racism. We won't repeat that kind of stuff. In any case, it has always seemed like whatever happened to Patchface, who definitely died, he drowned. He was at sea for 2 days and then washed up on the beach. They thought he was dead, and then he like kind of, woke up or whatever. But his skin's clammy cold, and he's obviously, we'll talk about the physical state of Patchface. Drowned people, cosplayers. That's what the Ironborn are. That is exactly right. That is exactly right. Yeah, no, this theory is great, and you can tell it's true because it makes sense of a lot of stuff. And that's always the mark of a good theory, is that it sorts things out when you apply it to other things. It makes sense. Okay, so, yeah, shout out to Michael Talks About Stuff. I saw he has a Patchface video. I have not looked at it. But yes, the story of Patchface. Let's go ahead and tell it. Then we'll compare that to Damphair, and you can see what I mean. So the Fool turned is patched, and this is Clash of Kings. This is the Crescent prologue chapter. The Fool turned his patched and piebald head to watch Pylos climb the steep iron steps to the rookery. His bells rang with emotion. "Under the sea, the birds have scales for feathers," he said, clang-a-langing. I know, oh, oh, oh." Even for a fool, Patchface was a sorry thing. Perhaps once he could evoke gales of laughter with a quip, but the sea had taken that power from him, along with half his wits and all his memory. He was soft and obese, subject to twitches and trembles, incoherent as often as not. The girl was the only one who laughed at him now, the only one who cared if he lived or died. Patchface had come to them as a boy. Lord Stefan of cherished memory had found him in Volantis, and that's Stefan Baratheon, Stannis and Robert's father, Renly's father. Found him in Volantis across the narrow sea. The king, the old king, Aerys II Targaryen, who had not been quite so mad in those days, had sent his lordship to seek a bride for Prince Rhaegar, who had no sisters to wed. Poor guy. That's just, man, nothing like a Targaryen alone in the world without a sister to wed. So, we have found the most splendid fool, he wrote Crescent, a fortnight before he was to return home from his fruitless mission. Only a boy, yet nimble as a monkey, and witty as a dozen courtiers. He juggles and rides and does magic, and he can sing prettily in 4 tongues. We have bought his freedom, and hope to bring him home with us. Robert will be delighted with him, and perhaps in time he will even teach Stannis how to laugh. But alas, it saddened Crescent to remember that letter. No one had ever taught Stannis how to laugh, least of all the boy Patchface. The storm came up suddenly, howling, and Shipbreaker Bay proved the truth of its name. The Lord's 2-masted galley Windproud broke up within sight of his castle. From its parapets, his 2 eldest sons had watched as their father's ship was smashed against the rocks and swallowed by the waters. And think about how sad, not sad, that is not the right word, horrifically traumatizing that would be to watch a ship that you knew your parents were on and watch it, like, it's small and it's a tiny little thing on the ocean and you could see it breaking up, but you know that people are dying. Like, it's horrible. I mean, it's all of the Baratheon brothers are sort of coping with this trauma. You know, Renly's sort of shirking of the more serious stuff and wanting to, like, really celebrate and be happy. Like, you get that, right? Stannis's dourness. You know, a lot of it's rooted in this. Sorry, we'll keep going with the theory. Just pause for human emotion there. So 100 oarsmen and sailors went down with Lord Stefan Baratheon and his lady wife. Hashtag small folk. Those people all had families too. And for days thereafter, every tide left a fresh crop of swollen corpses on the strand below Storm's End. The boy washed up on the 3rd day. Maester Crescent had come down with the rest to help put names to the dead. When they found the fool, he was naked, his skin white and wrinkled, and powdered with wet sand. Crescent had thought him another corpse, but when Jime grabbed his ankles to drag him off to the burial wagon, "I don't want to go on the cart," the boy coughed water and sat up. To his dying day, Jime had sworn that Patchface's flesh was clammy cold. "I'm not quite dead." No one ever explained those 2 days the fool had been lost at sea. The fisherfolk liked to say that a mermaid had taught him to breathe water in return for his seed. Patchface himself had said nothing. The witty, clever lad that Lord Stefan had written of never reached Storm's End. The boy they found was someone else, broken in mind and body, hardly capable of speech, much less of wit. Yet his fool's face left no doubt who he was. It was the fashion in the free city of Volantis to tattoo the faces of their slaves and servants. From neck to scalp, the boy's skin had been patterned in squares of red and green motley. "The wretch is mad and in pain, and no use to anyone, least of all himself," declared old Sir Harbert, the Castellan of Storm's End in those years. "The kindest thing you could do for that one is to fill his cup with milk of the poppy. A painless sleep, and there's an end to it. He'd bless you if he had the wit for it." But Crescent had refused, and in the end he had won. Whether Patchface had gotten any joy of that victory, he could not say, not even today, so many years later. "The shadows come to dance, my lord. Dance, my lord, dance, my lord," the fool sang on, swinging his head and making his bells clang and clatter. Bong dong, ring-a-ling, bong dong. This is a water resurrection. That's the first thing we can say about it. Not only was he gone for 2 days, not only is his, obviously, like, brain damage or something happened, his body was cold. He definitely died. This was not a momentary resuscitation. This is a water resurrection. Like, this did require magic. We know that there is fire and ice resurrection. There is probably green seer resurrection. Why else would the children be like, "Oh, don't try to call him back from death. That's very bad. And you can't do it anyway, so don't try." It's like, oh, yeah, okay. And it makes sense. George loves the cargo cult. In this world with magic, he likes to have it be so that like there's a magic ritual and then time goes on, the magic fades from it, but people keep doing the ritual. The Lord's Rite seemed the first night, that awful custom of the North, seems to date back to the time of Skin Changer and Warg Kings, who would have been trying to have as many kids as possible to spread their magic genes. So, if there is a real water resurrection, then perhaps that has something to do with the Ironborn faith and this weird tradition that's been carrying on for centuries and eons of drowning people and resuscitating them. And of course, Aeron is bringing it back a little bit by actually drowning people. It's a little more hardcore. It seems like the Ironborn had drifted to basically like sprinkle baptism, pouring a little seawater over their head like you see with Theon. It's still a meaningful ritual, but it's not drowning. So Patchface actually drowned. He resurrected. Now, the next question is there just magic in the water? And sometimes do people just come back from death? Or are there deep ones or squishers or mermaids or something, like the fisher folk say, creatures that actually resurrected him? Now, if you watch Nimbledick Squisher Hunt, you know that the squishers are real. They are. That George has populated his world with every kind of weird humanoid. And he presents it as a lot of, tall talk and whatever. But no, it's all real. There's weird evolution in this book. There are humanoids of all types. And the children of the forest have all kinds of animal attributes and yet are humanoid as well. So we know human-animal hybrids are a thing. And just as a reminder, if you'd like to support the program, you can do that with the PayPal link below in the chat. That's the best way. And I'll answer your question. You can leave a question in the comment and I'll get it. You can also use the super chat function. And by the way, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, we're almost to 100,000 subs. So you can be part of the pushing us over the thing, which would be cool. Thanks in advance. Now, I was reading the other day, I was just reading the wiki on Aeron Damphair. And here's the summary of Damphair. Aeron was born the youngest son from Lord Quelyn Greyjoy's second of 3 marriages. At 6 and 10, he called himself a man, but in truth he had been a ribald drunk who would sing, dance, play pipes, juggle, and ride horses. He drank much and claimed no one could piss longer or farther than him. He once wagered his ship against a flock of goats that he could douse a hearth fire by urinating on it, and subsequently outraged his brother Lord Balon by naming the ship the Golden Storm. During Greyjoy's rebellion, Aeron joined his brothers Victarion and Euron in raiding the coasts. Aeron nearly drowned when the Golden Storm was sunk by the war galley Fury, that's Stannis' galley, during the battle off Fair Isle, when the Ironborn fleet was caught in a trap set by the Master of Ships, Lord Stannis Baratheon. Aeron was initially believed to be lost at sea, but he washed ashore and was discovered by local fishermen who led him to Lannisport in chains. Aeron spent the rest of the rebellion as a prisoner of the Lannisters, but he was later returned to the Iron Islands. Aeron held pissing contests with lions, boars, and chickens while in captivity. So that's not the drowning. That's him being lost at sea. The drowning comes later. An unknown amount of time after the Greyjoy Rebellion, Aeron went down in a storm, but washed up ashore safely and unharmed. Due to his near-death experience, he underwent a spiritual reawakening and dedicated himself as a priest of the drowned god. He became hard, humorless, and ascetic, living as a hermit on the beach, spreading the word of their god, and becoming known primarily by his new name, Damphair. The acolytes serving under Aeron, called drowned men, do his bidding without question, and the Damphair is greatly respected by the Ironborn in general. He has never failed to resuscitate any of his followers with the kiss of life. Things that stand out here. First of all, total personality change. And similar to Patchface. His old character is basically that of a fool. He sings, dances, plays pipes, he juggles. Okay, that's very jester-like. Juggling, like that's beyond just telling jokes and being boisterous. He plays the pipes, he dances, he juggles, he drinks, and he loves to be obnoxious. He pisses all over everything and makes jokes about it and names his ship the Laughing Storm. Like that tells you how unserious of a person he is. Then he drowns and comes back and he's totally different. Okay, now he is not as crazy as Patchface, but I want to point out 2 things. One, Patchface drowned when he was a child. So there could be an arrested development. Well, there is an arrested development thing. Like his natural progression of human growth was stopped. Patchface was dead for 2 days. And Aeron, we don't know how long he was lost at sea for. So drowned when he was a child, dead for 2 days. Kind of like Stoneheart is less there than Barrack, because Barrack is brought back right away, whereas Stoneheart was dead for a couple days. So there's some of that going on. I think the arrested development is a big one. And then the last thing is that Aeron's insanity has a framework to latch on to, because he has this religion about the drowned god. So all of his mad ravings about under the sea, this and that, he's already got like theology and images in his head, things that his mind wants to see under the water. He's got a language for it. He's got a faith behind it. He's got an entire culture telling him that his beliefs are rooted in reality. So he is less insane than Patchface, but not much. And this is what we're going to see when you read through his quotes. The guy is pretty baked. He's pretty baked. And I think he drowned. So we'll talk about the implications in a minute, but let's read some. These will be quotes from Aeron, from Theon's POV. And this almost stands up. We're going to go into Damphair's mind in a minute. But even before that, when we're in Theon's POV and you see Damphair blurting things out, it's very Patchface. So check this out. Tall and thin, with fierce black eyes and a beak of a nose, the priest was garbed in mottled robes. Mottled, that's fool's motley, by the way. It's a lot of language paralleling, so I'll just point it out as it goes. In robes of green and gray and blue, the swirling colors of the drowned god. Oh, also, Aeron's ship, the Golden Storm, obviously Patchface, in service to House Baratheon, the Storm Lords, with a golden stag sigil, black stag on a golden field. And we've talked about how the Greyjoy and the Baratheon sigils are flipped colors. The Golden Storm is more of that. And then it said, perhaps once Patchface could evoke gales of laughter. So there's more storm imagery. And then Patchface wears antlers like the Storm Lords. Okay. So here's Aeron. He's in mottled robes, which again is fool's language. A water skin hung under his arm on a leather strap. Ropes of dried seaweed were braided through his waist-long black hair, an untrimmed beard. A memory prodded at Theon. In one of his rare curt letters, Lord Balin had written of his youngest brother going down in a storm and turning holy when he washed up safe on shore. "Uncle Aeron?" he said doubtfully. "Nephew Theon," the priest replied. "Your lord father bid me fetch you. Come." And then, skipping ahead a bit, Aeron says to Theon, who's like questioning his father's plans, he says, "It is not for you to question the commands of the Lord Reaper of Pike." The priest's manner was chilly, most unlike the man Theon remembered. Aeron Greyjoy had been the most amiable of his uncles, feckless and quick to laugh, fond of songs, ale, and women. "Kneel, or are you too proud now? A lordling of the Green Lands, come among us." One thing I want to point out is the way that Damphair talks. That one wasn't too bad, but a lot of his statements are not direct answers to people, but like more abstract sentences that have something to do with what's just been said. This is a little bit later, Theon riding up to the castle with Aeron. "Would that Patrick were with me now. Malister or no, he was a more amiable riding companion than this sour old priest that his uncle Aeron had turned into." The path they rode wound up and up into bare and stony hills. Soon they were out of sight of the sea, though the smell of salt still hung sharp in the damp air. They kept a steady plodding pace, past a shepherd's croft and the abandoned workings of a mine. This new, holy Aeron Greyjoy was not much for talk. They rode in a gloom of silence. Finally, Theon could suffer it no longer. "Robb Stark is Lord of Winterfell now," he said. Aeron rode on. "One wolf is much like the other." "Robb has broken fealty with the Iron Throne and crowned himself king in the north. There's war." "The maester's ravens fly over salt as soon as rock. This news is old and cold." "It means a new day, uncle." "Every morning brings a new day, much like the old." "In Riverrun they would tell you different. They say the Red Comet is a herald of a new age, a messenger from the gods." "A sign it is," the priest agreed. "But from our god, not theirs. A burning brand it is, such as our people carried of old. It is the flame the drowned god brought from the sea, and it proclaims a rising tide. It is time to hoist our sails and go forth into the world with fire and sword, as he did." Theon smiled. "I could not agree more. A man agrees with God as a raindrop with the storm." Okay, so almost everything that Aeron said there was like disassociative. Okay? It's like a poetry answer. He talks about what Robb Stark did. He's like, one wolf is much like the other. So it's almost like, sounds like a saying, like a wise saying or something. He also speaks about everybody in symbols. So he talks about the wolves. He talks about the comet as a symbol and what it means. When he's saying, "Oh, we heard this already," instead of saying, "We already know that," he says, "The maester's ravens fly over salt as soon as rock. This news is old and cold." So again, it's just a whacked out way of talking. And it's similar to what Patchface does, where he sort of hears what people are talking about and then says an insane thing that has something to do with what's going on. Like they're talking about leading a ranging to Hardhome when Patchface is with Stannis up at the wall. And Patchface is like, I will lead it. We will go into the sea and out again. So like he kind of knows what's going on, but the things he says are insane and all filtered through these visions of under the sea that he has. Because after the Deep Ones resurrect you, they have a psychic link to your mind, which is consistent with Lovecraft, more or less. They can sort of activate the half-breeds and hybrids to do things, which is where this is going and why Melisandre is so terrified of Patchface. By the way, just real quickly, yes, this is interesting legend. Who is the drowned god that brought fire from the sea? It sounds more like the Grey King. If you remember, the Grey King possesses the fire of Naga, the sea dragon. So you picture, I don't think that's really a dragon, obviously, but according to the legend, you figure Grey King slays this sea monster and hauls its carcass back to the shore to make a temple of its body, right? At some point there, he's bringing the fire of the sea dragon out of the sea. I guess that's what he's talking about. It could be meteor talk. It could be symbolism. But yeah, there's a couple references to the drowned god being reborn from the sea. And it's like, well, is that the Grey King? I'll get to that in the Deep Ones video. So let's not get too hung up on that for a minute. But no, it's not a whale. Although whalebone shelters are a thing. It's a weirwood boat. The island might be a volcano. Yes. Absolutely. And part of the legend, yes, could be a volcano. Naga's bones, however, would be petrified weirwood. And I'll give you that theory as soon as I can. I'm working on several Ironborn videos all at once. There's Damphair hanging out at Naga's ribs, giving glory to the drowned god. We'll leave that one up for a second. That's a pretty good Damphair. That was an interesting passage. Like I said, very disassociative, very symbolic, very abstract, very kooky. Here's a little later, it's either the same chapter or a different Theon chapter from Clash. "And what of you, uncle?" Theon asked. "You were no priest when I was taken from Pike. I remember how you would sing old reaving songs standing on the table with a horn of ale in your hand." "Young I was, and vain," Aeron Greatjoy said. "But the sea washed my follies and vanities away. That man drowned, nephew. His lungs filled with seawater, and the fish ate the scales off his eyes. When I rose again, I saw clearly. He is as mad as he is sour." Theon had liked what he remembered of the old Aeron Greyjoy. Yes, that man drowned. It's a little bit unclear how literal he's speaking of, because when he says the fish ate the scales off his eyes, that's obviously metaphorical. But he is kind of saying, yeah, his lungs filled with seawater. I mean, that's a literal, that sounds literal. That's not a metaphor. And what does he do? He makes other people fill their lungs with seawater, thinking that it will give them the same gusto that he has. But it doesn't. It doesn't. Like, he drowns his people. And I mean, they follow him and everything. But Aeron is different, right? He's like possessed. And I mean that, like he is possessed. So, and then what does a normal person think of Aeron? He's mad. He's crazy. Theon is not an Ironborn. He doesn't believe in the drowned god. You can tell when Theon talks about the drowned god, it's very much like, he's like, oh yeah, Aeron will sprinkle some water on the boat and say it's consecrated to his god. And Esgred's like, his god? And Theon's like, what is dead can never die. Yeah, totally, yeah. Theon doesn't believe. And so when he meets Aeron and hangs out with him, he's like, this guy's, he's mad. Just interesting perspective. Rolling on. This is when Theon is they're planning. This is Balon and Victarion and Aeron and Theon and Asha. They're planning the invasion of the North. Theon is trying to lobby for all kinds of things that aren't getting listened to. So it says, Lord Balon rode over him. The lords are gone south with the pup. Those who remain behind are the cravens, old men, and green boys. They will yield or fall, one by one. Winterfell may defy us for a year, but what of it? The rest shall be ours, forest and field and hall, and we shall make the folk our thralls and salt wives. Aeron Damphair raised his arms. And the waters of wrath will rise high, and the drowned god will spread his dominion across the green lands. What is dead can never die, Victarion intoned. Lord Balon and Asha echoed his words, and Theon had no choice but to mumble along with them. And then it was done. Again, you can see Theon's lack of belief, but even the rest of them, they're making plans about what to do. And Damphair raises his arms, and he's like, the waters of wrath will rise high, and the drowned god will spread his dominion across the green lands. What is he talking about? Like, it's just a totally abstract way of saying, well, the Ironborn will kick ass, and our god will be glorified throughout the land. But it's just very, obviously it's the language of a flood. But yeah, it's just very kooky thing to say. Everyone else is like, oh yeah, totally. What is dead can never die. Nobody else speaks like Aeron does. Everybody else speaks like a normal person, and then they just say the words. What is dead can never die. Yeah. It's like their little team huddle chant. But for Aeron, it's real. Okay? He's like, the drowned god will rise high, and his tide will wash over the Greenlands. So then later in that same passage, 8? This is Theon. His face reddened. What can I hope to accomplish with only 8 longships? You are to harry the stone shore, raiding the fishing villages and sinking any ships you chance to meet. It may be that you will draw some of the northern lords out from behind their stone walls. Aeron will accompany you, and Dagmar Cleftjaw. May the drowned god bless our swords, the priest said. So again, like, Aeron just blurts things out about the drowned god and under the sea that are just sort of tangentially related to what's going on. But he's not really participating in the conversation. You know what I mean? Then we go on to, oh yes, when Theon is in Winterfell. Theon wiped a spittle off his cheek, and they've just taken Winterfell, with the back of his hand. Robb will gut you, Greyjoy. Benford Talhart screamed. He'll feed your turncloak's heart to his wolf, you piece of sheep dung. Aeron Damphair's voice cut through the insults like a sword through cheese. Now you must kill him. I have questions for him first, said Theon. Your questions. Benford hung bleeding and helpless between Stig and Werlag. You'll choke on them before you get any answers from me, Craven Turncloak. Uncle Aeron was restless. When he spits on you, he spits on all of us. He spits on the drowned god. He must die. My father gave me command here, Uncle, and sent me to counsel you, and to watch me. Theon dare not push matters too far with his uncle. The command was his, yes, but his men had a faith in the drowned god that they did not have in him, and they were terrified of Aeron Damphair. I cannot fault them for that. So much in the same way that people are scared of Patchface because he's not right. Damphair has that same energy. He's not right, and people are afraid of him. He orders people to die based on things he hears from the ocean. It's very unpredictable and not operating with the same framework mentally or morally or spiritually or anything as anyone else. And that's what's terrifying. So it goes on. No, Aeron Damphair declared. He must be given to the god. The old way, because Theon orders him beheaded. What does it matter? Dead is dead. Take him then. You will come as well. You command here. The offering should come from you. That was more than Theon could stomach. You are the priest, Uncle. I leave the god to you. Do me the same kindness and leave the battles to me. He waved his hand, and Werlag and Stig began to drag their captive off toward the shore. Aeron Damphair gave his nephew a reproachful look, then followed. Down to the pebbled beach they would go, to drown Benford Talhart in salt water. The old way. Okay, so couple of observations from this passage. One, Aeron wants to give people to the drowned god. So if he's getting suggestions from the Deep Ones, what do the Deep Ones want? They want more people to be drowned so that the Deep Ones can possess them too. That would be part of the plan. The Deep Ones probably also want human sacrifices. We'll get to that. As in like children that they can breed with and stuff, as Nimbledick says. But the drowning, anybody that's drowned could potentially be repossessed by the Deep Ones, or maybe just like eaten by the Deep Ones, or maybe resurrected and bred with underwater. We don't know. But Aeron's agenda is consistent. When someone needs to die, he's like, no, we're going to drag them all the way out to the sea and drown them by the ocean and give them to the god. So yes, that is an interesting idea that he has. And he's very insistent, he's very fervent about it. But yeah, I had forgotten that Aeron was even with Theon on that raid. So before we get into the chapter, I guess I do want to talk about real quick the ramifications of how this would work and what it means. So first of all, there's no question Patchface is magically resurrected and he's receiving psychic messages about stuff. He says under the sea this and that, but like some of his quotes are clearly describing things that actually are happening. So it tells you that like he's not just seeing stuff that is literally under the sea. It's more like the sea language that he's translating whatever he's seeing into. He's getting messages from somewhere or someone. Because Patchface is so weird, I feel like the readers just don't think about it as like, oh, just something weird happened. He's resurrected out of the water. Who knows? Maybe it was a mermaid. When you look around and see that there are fishy humans, like literally all over the map, they're in Westeros, Thousand Islands. Obviously, the Deep Ones are real, and obviously they've bred with people that live on islands, including some of the Ironborn. So, logic would dictate that Patchface was resurrected by the Deep Ones, and that now they are sending him messages, and potentially, and again, going back to Lovecraft, which is where the Deep Ones come from, Patchface could be activated. Maybe not remote piloted, but like the ideas that he has are suggestions that are coming from the Deep Ones. Like he's getting like, oh, I will lead us into the sea and go out again. He says like, let's do this, let's do that sometimes. It's not just the shadows come to dance, and stuff like that. So when you look at Aeron and the things that he is suggesting that we do, a sleeper agent, exactly. The Aeron is suggesting that they do. Think about it. He calls the King's Moot that steers the choice of who leads the Ironborn. And at the King's Moot, a bunch of weird stuff happens potentially with magic and the dragon horn and Euron swaying the crowd suddenly when they were 4 Victarion previously. Like the Deep Ones may have wanted that King's Moot. And Aeron is the one who called it. Aeron, like I said, he is drowning people again all over the Iron Islands. Most of them are converts to his religion, but when he needs to execute somebody, they do the same thing. They drown him and just don't resurrect him. Probably just let their body float away into the sea for the Deep Ones to collect. I mean, it is right there, okay? So then, if you go back in time and think about all these drowned priests, the very first King's Moot was called by drowned priests. The drowned priests have incredible power. They are more powerful than the kings. They have vetoed other religions right off of the Iron Islands. When the Andals came and conquered the Iron Islands, which they did, they just intermarried with Islanders and converted to the religion of the drowned god. And the faith never took hold, even though the Andals intermarried with Ironborn all over the place. All the stuff that the drowned priests have been doing is potentially suspect. Aeron thinks about the Grey King being reborn from the sea, so it suggests that he was drowned. And one would assume, going back further in time, the more real the drowning gets. You get back to the point where they were actually, what would it be like? What was the original ritual like? Like piece it together. Drowning people, giving them to the Deep Ones, and then the Deep Ones choosing like who to resurrect and sending them back on shore as Patchfaces, as tools, as robots, as slaves, as thralls. Thralls is the word, folks. That's right. There's a reason why the Ironborn love thraldom. Yes, it's a first man custom. First men are only associated with thraldom in a couple places, couple of times, and it died out a long time ago. But the Ironborn love thralldom. Wonder why that is. 'Cause the original thralls were probably these drowned people, the drowned men, they would all be Deep Ones controlled or potentially Deep Ones controlled. So you can see how this cult really works. The drowned priests are leading the religion and the culture. They are drowned and mind controlled or mind suggested by the Deep Ones. The drowned priests tell everybody what to do, and what they tell people to do is to drown themselves and drown each other and drown their sacrifices, maybe leave some of their children on the shoreline or something. If only there was some kind of Deep Ones idol or something that looked like it could be used to give children or sacrifices, something like an altar maybe, where you could put children, the Deep Ones could come collect them. I don't know, maybe like a big kraken shaped thing with like a little seed in it. You'd put it on the shoreline. Wait, wasn't the sea stone chair found on the shores of Old Wick by the first people who got there? On the shores? Wonder what a big kraken idol would be doing on the shoreline with a seed in it. Wonder what we do with that. What do you guys think? Told you it's gonna be a loose cannon today, but this is fun. This is the story. And I'll give you more proof for the sea stone chair thing in the Deep Ones video. But yeah, there's been a cult of the Deep Ones on the Iron Islands for thousands of years. And we can assume that this was taking place in other places in Westeros where the Deep Ones have been breeding with people, like on the Three Sisters, Cracklaw Point, the Cranog Men, all these places, White Harbor, where we find fish people, Sisterton especially. We can assume that the Deep Ones were mind-controlling people and steering the culture and getting more people to be drowned and given to the water, and potentially children. So this is all about baby stealing because George is mainly pulling most of this folklore from like Fae mythology, Celtic and Irish folklore about changelings and fairies stealing children and breeding with children and swapping children. Everything about the others stealing babies is from that. And the Deep Ones are basically parallels to the others. The others are monsters that come out of the Green Sea, which is just the Weirwood net. Okay? The Deep Ones are the monsters that come out of the actual sea. And they both want babies to breed with. And they're both pale monsters that people might turn into or something. So you can see how that is. Yes, breeding with. Absolutely. That's what all this is about. Freaky, nasty, human-animal hybrid stuff. Yeah, Old Wick. Think about a candle wick or the wick on a stick of dynamite, the one that blew up a long time ago. That's the idea. Of course, wick actually means town. So Old Wick means old town. Interesting. Breeding with babies. No. Oh, the squishers. No, I guess. Well, look, I don't know how it works. I mean, the others collect Craster's babies and turn them into others. I'm not suggesting. Okay, poor choice of words. What does Nimbledick say? The boys they eat and the girls they keep to breed with. So, I don't know what the squisher age of consent is. You could hash that out if you want. We're not probably supposed to think about that, baby. So I apologize for leading you down that path. But it is a dark path that we walk when we walk by the shoreline. Yes, we're not endorsing anything the squishers do on this channel. Keep that in mind. Or the Ironborn. Stealing is illegal. When I try to play Ironborn at the pool party, suddenly I'm the bad guy. Yeah, that's why I say do not imitate. Okay, so that is what the Sea Stone chair is used for giving children to the squishers. And that's not like, how do they get people to do that? Because the drowned priests are the ones who lead this culture, this cult, and they are mind controlled by the Deep Ones. So that's how it works. And now it makes sense. No wonder the religion is so persistent and lasts for so long. Okay, so how does this work for the end of the story? Well, Patchface obviously is at the wall. And we've heard there are dead things in the water at Hardhome. So that could be a squisher thing. The squishers might be doing stuff up at the wall. I don't know what their agenda is, if they have an agenda for like the end game of the story, or if it's all just like getting people to be drowned and stealing children and stuff like that. It's hard to say if they have a bigger motive. The bigger motive would be something connected to like, Lovecraftian deities that they serve. Like the Bloodstone Emperor with the black meteor that's like the the trapezohedron. The shining trapezohedron is a way to talk to Cthulhu, okay? So, could be that George is implying weird interdimensional beings that people like Aeron and Bloodstone Emperor are contacting. But I don't really know how much he's going to spell any of that out. I think that'll probably just be implied. But nevertheless, if the Deep Ones have any kind of agenda beyond just like taking people and breeding with people and stuff, it would come from some sort of connection to a deity like that. But Patchface is lurking around at the wall. He could potentially be activated. And that, again, I think that's why Melisandre is so strangely terrified of him, unlike anyone else. He must smell like Squisher. He's probably got some evil magic residue about him that she can detect. And so she's just like, get away from me. Like, yeah. Is he going to take Shireen? We don't, I mean, it seems like Shireen's probably going to be burned, but it's hard to say. Squishers are humans who mixed with the Deep Ones instead of green men because they thought hope was lost against the others. You heard it here first. That's an interesting idea. I think it'd be the Deep Ones that initiate all that stuff. But I'll also point out Davos drowned. Now, Davos, we're inside his head. He does not seem insane. He does have kind of a weird experience after he drowns, where he's talking to the mother and he's yelling at his gods. Now, he just lost 4 children, so I don't really think this needs a magical explanation. But he then goes and gets this weird idea to kill Melisandre, which is kind of extreme. I mean, he's a pirate. I'm sure he's killed people a long time ago. It's been a while. But again, he just lost 4 children. Wasn't really Melisandre's fault. She wasn't even at the battle. But I guess if he conflated in his mind, oh, well, Stannis is following Mel, and that's why he did this, and that's why my kids died. But it's a little crazy how Davos goes and tries to kill Melisandre. I guess what I'm pointing out is that Davos is at the wall, too, with Patchface. So maybe the Deep Ones have a hold of Davos as well, even though he's not crazy. I don't think so. I think it's just Patchface and Aeron. I just want to mention it. More of a smuggler. Well, yeah, I guess. That's true. Smuggler, not a pirate. Is there a big difference? I guess there is. Pirates steal from regular people. Smugglers are essentially stealing from the crown by doing off-the-books trading. Yeah, I guess that is very different. That is very different. That's fair. A smuggler is several levels above a pirate, morality-wise. Pirates are just thieves and butchers who dress flamboyantly. Which you give them style points for that. But yeah, smugglers are just tax dodgers, really. That's not quite the same. Sneaking in is different than taking out. There you go, Call Karsnak. I won't tolerate all these Squisher microaggressions, says Squisher King. Yeah, Squishers don't deal in microaggressions. They deal in macroaggressions. Don't they? When Winds of Winter comes out, Shireen gets burned. Will it be time to stop saying praise Garth and start saying burn Shireen as the youth? No, it will not be. Whose idea was that? No, Sage. That's cold as ice, baby. That is cold as ice. Kelly asks, do you think the Sea Stone Chair has any mystical or even advanced scientific powers that look like magic? First of all, there are no scientific powers that look like magic in the story. If it looks like magic, it is magic. And even stuff that looks like science is magic. But yes, I absolutely think all the Oily Stone possesses magical properties. Absolutely. Okay, so Ashai and Yin, they have tons of Oily Stone, and they are toxic. No plants grow on the whole Ashai Peninsula besides ghost grass, and the plant that grows the Strangler. It's a poison leaf, whatever. Children don't do well there. Animals don't survive long there. Yin, the plants won't scarcely grow into the jungle doesn't really grow over the stones. Moat Kalen, there's a little bit of lichen on the stones, but that's about it. It might be Oily Stone. So yeah, Theon remarks on Balin looking especially decrepit and aged only 9 years after he's seen him last. And I think it's implied that he's aged a lot. Maybe that's from having a rebellion crushed. It puts several years on you. Graze up the sides real quick. But it could be because he's been literally sitting on an oily black stone for however many years. And then that's not good for you. But the real magic of the Sea Stone Chair is that it was dragged ashore by the Deep Ones to use as a sacrifice idol by the ancient Ironborn, which I'll prove to you in an upcoming video. Is it just coincidence that George nicknamed Aeron Damphair, as in Damphair, half human, half vampire? Kirsty, that is a wonderful comment. Thank you so much. Because I used to say it Damphair. The audiobook says Damphair. I thought it was like meant to be Damphair and that George was making a joke that it looks like damp hair. But it is actually supposed to be Damphair. Like his nickname is Damphair because he has damp hair. It's that simple. I was trying to think like Damphair. That sounds like another word. What is it? So thank you. We couldn't be called Wetbeard. That would imply that he gets play. And Damphair does not get play. So he's not Wetbeard. Ba-boom. And yes, half human, half vampire. Because this would be about the Squishers and the others, who are both vampiric. They are both taking children, taking sacrifices. The others are the biggest vampires, but the Squishers are much the same. They are... Anybody that's a magical predator is a vampire. That's the meaning of vampire. It means that you feed on other people's magic energy. The meaning of vampire in the story. That's the parallel. There are no... Dracula's not in the story, but the others are. The Undying are similar, right? They're literally biting Dany's body and sucking on her. And like, it seems like they're gonna eat her. But obviously... Somehow they're consuming her magical energy to sustain their magic and power. That is obvious. So that works really well. Thank you. Thank you, Kirsty. All right. The prophet. Oh, hats. You want a hat? Yeah, we have hats. The prophet was drowning men on Great Wick when they came to tell him that the king was dead. It was a bleak, cold morning, and the sea was as leaden as the sky. The first 3 men had offered their lives to the drowned god fearlessly, but the 4th was weak in faith and began to struggle as his lungs cried out for air. Standing waist deep in the surf, Aeron seized the naked boy by the shoulders and pushed his head back down as he tried to snatch a breath. "Have courage," he said. "We came from the sea, and to the sea we must return. Open your mouth and drink deep of God's blessing. Fill your lungs with water that you may die and be reborn. It does no good to fight. We came from the sea, and to the sea we must return." That is Shadow over Innsmouth stuff. That is language that specifically is talking about how people that the Squishers breed with, the hybrids, turn more fishy over time and eventually return to the sea. So he's literally saying, we come from the sea, and to the sea we must return. That's how it works. That is correct. Deep One theology. Either the boy could not hear him with his head beneath the waves. Yeah, you can't. Or else his faith had utterly deserted him. He began to kick and thrash so wildly that Aeron had to call for help. 4 of his drowned men waded out to seize the wretch and hold him underwater. "Lord God, who drowned for us," the priest prayed in a voice as deep as the sea, "let Emond your servant be reborn from the sea as you were. Bless him with salt, bless him with stone, bless him with steel." So here again, well, first of all, George takes a lot of Jesus language and just repackages it, for the Ironborn in particular. Which just makes it, because it's like weird baptism, right? It's all this like weird baptism. So that's here, you know, Lord God who drowned for us, like Lord Jesus who died for us. Let Emond your servant be reborn, like that's also biblical language as well. But again, we get to this whole idea of who is the drowned God? Somebody that drowned and was reborn. Who, like the first person that drowned and was reborn was seen as a god. Is that the Grey King? Is that the Leal elder brother? Is that their dad? It's hard to say. The drowned god doesn't sound like this entity that's just beneath the water. Like he came out of the sea carrying fire or something, and he's reborn from the sea. So, interesting theology to zero in on there. Also, Aeron is ostensibly this person signed up to be drowned, but then they change their mind. But you can't change your mind. Once you tell Aeron you want to be drowned, he's just going to keep drowning you. So just observe that. No take-backs. Finally, it was done. No more air was bubbling from his mouth, and all the strength had gone out of his limbs. Face down in the shallow sea floated Emond, pale and cold and peaceful. That was when the Damphair realized that 3 horsemen had joined his drowned men on the pebbled shore. Aeron knew the spar, a hatchet-faced old man with watery eyes, whose quavery voice was law on this part of Great Wick. His son Stafarian accompanied him, with another youth, whose dark red fur-lined cloak was pinned at the shoulder with an ornate brooch that showed the black and gold war horn of the Good Brothers. One of Gorold's sons, the priest decided at a glance. 3 tall sons had been born to Goodbrother's wife late in life, after a dozen daughters, and it was said that no man could tell one son from the others. Well, that's all very suspicious language, isn't it? A dozen daughters, 3 sons, you can't tell one from the others. We'll have to talk about the Goodbrothers another time. It's kind of a different mystery. Aeron Damphair did not deign to try. Whether this be Graydon or Gormund or Gran, the priest had no time for him. So I just want to point out that Aeron Damphair orients his entire thinking towards the sea. Okay? People that live on land think about the castles as the centers of power. They live at the castles, they leave the castles, and they come back to the castles. People in the towns look at the castles up on the hill, and that's where the power is. Aeron doesn't give a crap about the castles or anybody's fancy stuff. In his mind, the power comes from the sea and from Naga's ribs. And those castles on the land, they're far away. They're distant from the center of things. So Aeron does a circuit around the shore. He drowns people all over Great Wick and Old Wick. He just wanders around and drowns people. And if the lords need to talk to him, they've just got to like ride out to the shore and just sort of find him. They might have to look for him for a while. I just want to point that out. Completely different axis of power and understanding, and where they sort of just center their minds around. Like, what's the center of town? For most of the Ironborn, it's the castles, but for Aeron, it's the sea itself. And you could tell by the way he lives. Because he's like, oh, it's one of the Goodbrothers, whatever. Those are some of the most powerful lords on the Iron Islands. He does not give a rat's ass. He growled a brusque command, and his drowned men seized the dead boy by his arms and legs to carry him above the tide line. The priest followed, naked but for a sealskin clout that covered his private parts. Goose-fleshed and dripping, he splashed back onto land. Yeah, let's point out that it's like really cold. This is a cold-ass sea that they are hanging out in loincloths. Okay, so goose-fleshed and dripping, he splashed... Oh, do I have this picture? Yes, I do. He splashed back onto land across cold, wet sand and sea-scoured pebbles. One of his drowned men handed him a robe of heavy rough spun, dyed in mottled greens and blues and grays, the colors of the sea and the drowned god. Aeron donned the robe and pulled his hair free. Black and wet, that hair. No blade had touched it since the sea had raised him up. So this is another clue about how much of a change. It wasn't a gradual change. It wasn't like, oh, he grew more priestly. He came out of the sea different. That's how he thinks about it. That's how he talks about it. He's like, ever since that day, I don't cut my hair. So it draped his shoulders like a ragged, ropey cloak. Ragged cloak, like rags. That's another fool and motley term. Patchface wears rags. He also wears seal skins and otter skins when they get up to the wall. He has to make a new motley, but he does it out of animal skins. So, Bing Bong says, David, I just want to thank you for opening my mind to the layers of symbolism and mythos George is building. Oh yes, much love right back at you. Happy to do it. Very happy to do it. Works out for everyone. You learn and grow as a person, understand the transformative power of symbolism, mythology, and storytelling. And I have the joy of bringing people into those things, which makes me feel worthwhile as a human. And I get to pay my rent all at the same time. Dead people don't grow that much hair. Well, that's the thing, is they're resurrected. Like Patchface was resurrected as a kid. He grew it. His body kept growing. So the Deep One resurrection is not the same as the ice and fire whiting. These are brought back to life. Yes, exactly, baby. We know that from Patchface. We know that he died. We know that he came back, and then we know that he grew up physically, but not mentally. He was stopped there. He never got older than that. He's just a little undead. Yeah. It is different. This is probably another reason why we should suspect that there's a better resurrection waiting for Jon Snow that might have to do with Greenseer powers and Bran and Bloodraven. If they can raise him from the dead, he could be better than just a Firewhite. He might have flowing blood and thus boner power. Danny might care about that. We'll see. We'll see. Aeron wove strands of seaweed through his beard and hair, through his hair and through his tangled, uncut beard. His drowned men formed a circle around the dead boy, praying. Norjan worked his arms while Russ knelt astride him, pumping on his chest, but all moved aside for Aeron. He pried apart the boy's cold lips with his fingers and gave Emmon the kiss of life, and again, until the sea came gushing from his mouth. The boy began to cough and spit, and his eyes blinked open, full of fear. Another one returned. Skål, Martin. It was the sign of the drowned god's favor, men said. Every other priest lost a man from time to time, even Tarl the thrice-drowned, who had once been thought so holy that he was picked to crown a king. He was picked to crown a king. That's interesting language. It used to be that the drowned priests would pick the kings, or at least hold the king's moots. But when Balaam was crowned, they ran, and he was already the lord of the Iron Islands, but when he took up the crown and did the Greyjoy Rebellion, they went over to Old Wick, and Tarl the Thrice-Drowned put a driftwood crown on Balin's head. But that wasn't a king's moot, because no one voted, no one else was up for choosing. So it was a sham, it was a mockery of a king's moot. It was a fake election. So that's what he's talking about here. Tarl the Thrice-Drowned was selected to put the crown on Balin's head in a fake ceremony. Anyway. But never Aeron Greyjoy. He was the Damphair who had seen his god's own watery halls and returned to tell of it. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that the book is right. He did see the watery halls. That means he touched the deep ones. That's what it means. Because again, in Lovecraft world, the deep ones build cities underwater just offshore of places like Innsmouth where they want to farm people. And those people then swim down to those watery halls when they're fishy enough, when they're old enough. So when Aeron talks about how they got to go to the drowned god's watery halls upon death, that's Innsmouth stuff. And so here, he's saying he's seen the watery halls and been back. That means he's made contact with the deep ones. That's what that means. Rise, he told the sputtering boy as he slapped him on his naked back. You have drowned and been returned to us. What is dead can never die. But rises. The boy coughed violently, bringing up more water. Rises again. Every word was bought with pain, but that was the way of the world. A man must fight to live. Rises again. Emmon staggered to his feet, harder and stronger. You belong to the god now, Aeron told him. You belong to the Squishers now. Like, this stuff sounds like kooky, weird mumbo-jumbo when you first read it, but it's all very straightforward, actually. This is just, Aeron is telling us what the Deep Ones do. This is great. You belong to the Deep Ones now, Aeron told him. The other drowned men gathered round and each gave him a punch and a kiss to welcome him to the Brotherhood. Welcome to the cult. One helped him don a rough-spun robe of mottled blue and green and gray. Another presented him with a driftwood cudgel. So a cudgel is a bit like a scepter. So this is a clue that probably the Grey King, who's said to wear the first driftwood crown, sit on a throne of weirwood, he was probably the drowned god, like the first one, and that's what this is imitating. You belong to the sea now, so the sea has armed you, Aeron said. We pray that you shall wield your cudgel fiercely against all enemies of our god. Only then did the priest turn to the three riders, watching from their saddles. Have you come to be drowned, my lords? The spar coughed. I was drowned as a boy, he said, and my son upon his name day. Aeron snorted. That Stefarian spar had been given to the drowned god soon after birth, he had no doubt. He knew the manner of it, too, a quick dip in a tub of seawater that scarce wet the infant's head. Small wonder the Ironborn had been conquered, they who once held sway everywhere the sound of waves was heard. Which is, again, paralleling the Ironborn and the Deep Ones. Like, you go near the water and the Ironborn will get you. That's just like the deep ones. That is no true drowning, he told the riders. He that does not die in truth cannot hope to rise from death. Why have you come if not to prove your faith? So let's see here. Lord Gorald's son came seeking you with news. The spar indicated the youth in red cloak. The boy looked to be no more than 6 and 10. Aye, and which are you? Aeron demanded. Gormund, good brother, if it pleases my lord. It is the drowned god we must please. Have you been drowned, Gormund, good brother? On my name day, Damphair, my father sent me to find you and bring you to him. He needs to see you. Here I stand. Let Lord Gorald come and feast his eyes. All of a sudden, Aeron transforms into like Beefcake Chad. Like, let him feast his eyes. Aeron took a leather skin from Russ, freshly filled with water from the sea. The priest pulled out the cork and took a swallow. So, like, drinking seawater is not good. You know that, right? Like, if you're in the ocean and you're stuck, don't drink the seawater. It's not going to help. So, this is very much just to, like, show that he's tough and of the sea and all that. But I don't know. An actual Squisher hybrid maybe could drink seawater. The priest pulled out a cork, took a swallow. I am to bring you to the keep, insisted young Gormund from atop his horse. He is afraid to dismount, lest he gets his boots wet. I have the gods' work to do. Aeron Greyjoy was a prophet. He did not suffer petty lords ordering him about like some thrall. Again, you see the conversational disconnect where they're trying to talk to him about stuff. And he's like, have you been drowned? Would you like to be drowned? That wasn't a true drowning. Real drowning is when you drown. It's like, okay, dude. Gorald's had a bird, said the spar. A maester's bird from Pike, Gormund confirmed. Dark wings, dark words. The ravens fly over salt and stone. If there are tidings that concern me, speak them now. So he's basically saying the ravens fly over the sea and the land, so therefore I should know about them because I'm the Lord of the Sea, or something abstract and weird like that, instead of just saying, tell me now. Such tidings as we bear for you are for your ears alone, Damphair, the spar said. These are not matters I would speak of here before these others. These others are my drowned men, God's servants just as I am. I have no secrets from them, nor from our God, beside whose holy sea I stand. So, a couple things there. One, the drowned men who seem like whites are often paralleled to the others or the whites. And that just continues the whole thing with the Squishers being like the others. The bit about the Holy See, that is George giving a reference to the Pope. And the seat of the Pope in Rome, that's called the Holy See. I don't know why that is or what that means, but it's S-E-E-C, not S-E-A-C. But here, George is giving a shout out to that when he says Holy See. The horsemen exchanged a look. Like, is this guy for real? Tell him, said the spar, and the youth in the red cloak summoned up his courage. The king is dead, he said, as plain as that. 4 small words, yet the sea itself trembled when he uttered them. So this is Aeron's inner monologue here. And he's like, oh, the sea trembles with your news. What? So, but again, this is insane. He's just been told that Balon Greyjoy is dead. And his first thought is like, oh, the sea trembles. Like he's constantly aware of what the sea thinks and feels about stuff. Which is just like Patchface. It's the same thing. 4 kings there were in Westeros, yet Aeron did not need to ask which one was meant. Balon Greyjoy ruled the Iron Islands, and no other. The king is dead. How can that be? Aeron had seen his eldest brother not a moon's turn past when he had returned to the Iron Islands from harrying the stony shore. Balon's gray hair had gone half white, whilst the priest had been away, and the stoop in his shoulders was more pronounced than when the longship sailed. Yet all in all, the king had not seemed ill. This is more evidence about the seastone chair wearing Balon down. Aeron Greyjoy had built his life upon 2 mighty pillars. Those 4 small words had knocked one down. Only the drowned god remains to me. May he make me as strong and tireless as the sea. Tell me the manner of my brother's death. His grace was crossing a bridge at Pike when he fell and was dashed upon the rocks below. The Greyjoy stronghold stood upon a broken headland, its keeps and towers built upon massive stone stacks that thrust up from the sea. By the way, in another quote, it says, like the pillars of some sea god's temple, which is exactly what it is. Yeah, the sea stone chair. Exactly, Lucas. You got it. Seafood chairs, more like it. Correct. Kyle, father to Bears, that's correct. The Greyjoy stronghold was built upon a broken headland. Okay, bridges knotted, piked together. Arched bridges of carved stone and swaying spans of hempen rope and wooden planks. Was the storm raging when he fell? Aeron demanded of them. Aye, the youth said, it was. The storm god cast him down, the priest announced. So he's done an investigation. He's done an investigation, and he knows what happened. He said, was there a storm? Yes. Then it was the storm god. Because the storm god. We know him. He's a bastard. Case closed. For 1,000 years, sea and sky had been at war. From the sea had come the Ironborn, and the fish that sustained them even in the depths of winter. But storms brought only woe and grief. My brother Balin made us great again. Made us great again by making us losers. Like they lost that rebellion. Balin lost his 2 oldest sons, and Theon was taken by the Starks. But anyway, nothing but winning. We're going to just keep winning. Oh, man. All right. Balin made us great again, which earned the storm god's wrath. He feasts now in the drowned god's watery halls with mermaids to attend his every want. It shall be for us who remain behind in this dry and dismal vale to finish his great work. Like, this is a real traumatic event. His brother just died. One of the 2 pillars of his whole existence. How does he cope? Not by crying or dealing with his emotion. By hallucinating shit about the sea. That's how he copes. He's like, oh, the storm god cast him down, but now he's feasting with the mermaids, so it's okay. Oh, man. I mean, that would be okay, but who doesn't like mermaids? He pushed the cork back into his water skin. I shall speak with your lord father. How far from here to Hammerhorn? 6 leagues. You may ride pillion with me. 1 can ride faster than 2. Give me a horse, and the drowned god will bless you. So now we're at this picture here. Oh, whoops. This one. And this is Arden Beckwith. Take my horse, Damphair, offered Stefarian Spar. No, his mount is stronger. Your horse, boy. The youth hesitated for half a heartbeat, then dismounted and held the reins for the Damphair. Aeron shoved a bare black foot into a stirrup and swung himself onto the saddle. He was not fond of horses. They were creatures from the Greenlands and helped to make men weak. But necessity required that he ride. Now, Aeron used to ride horses all the time. That's one of the things that's spelled out. Used to sing, tell jokes, and juggle, and ride horses. But now he's like, oh, I don't like horses. Like, yeah, you do. You used to like horses. But his whole personality's been erased, so he doesn't anymore. Like, he's completely internalized this. He doesn't even think, oh, I used to like horses. He's just like, oh, no, I don't like horses. They make men weak. So, dark wings, dark words. A storm was brewing. He could hear it in the waves. And the storms brought naught but evil. So he's hearing stuff from the waves right now. Meet with me at Pebbleton, beneath Lord Merlin's tower, he told his drowned men, as he turned the horse's head. The way was rough, up hills and woods and stony defiles, along a narrow track that oft seemed to disappear beneath the horse's hooves. Great Wick was the largest of the Iron Islands, so vast that some of its lords had holdings that did not front upon the holy sea. Gorold Goodbrother was one such. His keep was in the hard stone hills, as far from the drowned god's realm as any place in the isles. Gorold's folk toiled down in Gorold's mines, in the stony dark beneath the earth. Some lived and died without setting eyes upon salt water. Small wonder that such folk are crabbed and queer. As Aeron rode, his thoughts turned to his brothers. 9 sons had been born from the loins of Quelyn Greyjoy, the lord of the Iron Islands. Let's see, Harlan, Quentin, and Donal had been born of Lord Quelyn's first wife, a woman of the stone trees. Balin, Euron, Victarion, Uragon, and Aeron were the sons of his second, a Sunderly of Saltcliffe. So, stone trees, that's a stone tree, that's Naga's ribs. Saltcliffe, their sigil is the Hydra. So we got a Naga's ribs, and then a sea dragon reference for Balin's wives. For a third wife, Quellen took a girl from the Greenlands who gave him a sickly idiot boy named Robin, the brother best forgotten. The priest had no memory of Quentin or Donnel, who had died as infants. And Donnel is obviously a variation on Donner, which means thunder. Harlan he recalled but dimly, sitting gray-faced and still in a windowless tower room and speaking in whispers that grew fainter every day as the grayscale turned his tongue and lips to stone. So the stone tree wife gave birth to the grayscale kid, which is like turning into a stone tree. It's very similar. One day we shall feast on fish together in the drowned god's watery halls, the four of us and Yuri too. 9 sons had been born from the loins of Quellen Greyjoy, but only 4 had lived to manhood. That was the way of this cold world, where men fished the sea, and dug in the ground, and died, whilst women brought forth short-lived children from beds of blood and pain. Aeron had been the last and least of the 4 Krakens, Balin the eldest and boldest, a fierce and fearless boy, who lived only to restore the Ironborn to their ancient glory. At 10, he scaled the flint cliffs to the Blind Lord's haunted tower. That's interesting. I've never heard... I don't remember that. The Blind Lord's haunted tower. At 13, he could run along ships. That's, yeah, on the flint cliffs. So that kind of implies the Ironborn used to have a tower on the flint cliffs. That's interesting. At 13, he could run along ship's oars and dance the finger dance as well as any man in the Isles, which means you can throw knives and hatchets and catch them without chopping your fingers off. Completely insane. At 15, Balin had sailed with Dagmar Cleftjaw to the Stepstones and spent a summer reaving. He slew his first man there and took his first 2 salt wives. At 17, Balin captained his own ship. He was all that an elder brother ought to be, though he had never shown Aeron aught but scorn. I was weak and full of sin, and scorn was more than I deserved. Better to be scorned by Balin the Brave than beloved by Euron Crowseye. And if age and grief had turned Balin bitter with the years, they had also made him more determined than any man alive. He was born a lord's son and died a king, murdered by a jealous god, Aeron thought. And now the storm is coming, a storm such as these isles have never known. So once again, everything that happens in Aeron's mind is filtered through the language of the sea, just like Patchface. Everything that happens, Patchface relates into language of the sea. If he sees a vision of the Red Wedding, he still describes it in sea language. And the same for Damphair. It was long after dark by the time the priest espied the spiky iron battlements of the Hammerhorn clawing at the crescent moon. Gorold's keep was hulking and blocky, its great stones quarried from the cliff that loomed behind it. Below its walls, the entrances of caves and ancient mines yawned, like toothless black mouths. The Hammerhorn's iron gates had been closed and barred for the night. Aeron beat on them with a rock until the clanging woke a guard. The youth who admitted him was the image of Gormund, whose horse he'd taken. "Which one are you?" Aeron demanded. "Gran. My father awaits you within." So you can see Aeron literally has no respect or courtesy for these princes. The hall was dank and draughty, full of shadows. One of Gorold's daughters offered the priest a horn of ale. Another poked at the sullen fire that was giving off more smoke than heat. Gorold Goodbrother himself was talking quietly with a slim man in fine gray robes. He wore about his neck a chain of many metals that marked him for a maester of the citadel. "Where's Gormund?" Gorold asked when he saw Aeron. "He returns afoot. Send your women away, my lord, and the maester as well." He had no love of maesters. The ravens were creatures of the storm god, and he did not trust their healing, their healing, not since Yuri. No proper man would choose a life of thraldom, nor forge a chain of servitude to wear about his throat. So interesting theological clash there, right? He's not wrong. The maesters are like servants. They are servants of the realm and of knowledge and the citadel and all that, and the Hightower agenda. And so to Aeron, that's like, yeah, I would never do that. Of course, he himself is a thrall of the Deep Ones, so it's all a matter of perspective, isn't it? "Gisela, Gwyn, leave us," Goodbrother said curtly. "You as well, Gran. Maester Muir will stay." Kara asks with a PayPal, thank you, Kara. "Do you think that Patchface and Aeron have inherited a squishy soul? Did they skin change into a fish when they drowned, or a god? Wondering if it works similar to how Bran inherited all the souls of the Green Seers." I don't think so, but it's hard to say. I think that it just gives the Deep Ones a link to their mind. And so their imagination is now run by the Deep Ones. So all the things that he thinks about, this mental imagery, comes from under the sea. But it's hard to say. I love your use of squishy soul. That's good. Let's see here. "Maester Muir will stay." "He will go," insisted Aeron. So now he's fighting with Lord Goodbrother. So we're having a power clash here. Like, because Lord Goodbrother's kind of like, okay, dude, you don't come into my hall and tell me who's leaving the room. And Aeron's like, yeah, I do. This is my hall, Damphair. It is not for you to say who must go and who remains. The maester stays. The man lives too far from the sea, Aeron told himself. Then I shall go, he told Goodbrother. Dry rushes rustled underneath the cracked soles of his bare black feet as he turned and stalked away. It seemed he had ridden a long way for naught. Aeron was almost at the door when the maester cleared his throat and said, Euron Crow's-Eye sits the sea stone chair. The Damphair turned. The hall had grown suddenly colder. The Crow's-Eye is half a world away. Balon sent him off 2 years ago and swore that it would be his life if he returned. Tell me, he said hoarsely. Oh, now he wants to know what the maester has to say. He sailed into Lordsport. Oh, this is Gorold. Okay. He sailed into Lordsport the day after the king's death and claimed the castle and the crown as Balon's eldest brother, said Gorold Goodbrother. Now he sends forth ravens, summoning the captains and the kings from every isle to Pike, to bend their knees and do him homage as their king. No, Aeron Damphair did not weigh his words. Only a godly man may sit the sea stone chair. The Crow's-Eye worships naught but his own pride. You were on Pike not long ago, and saw the king, said Goodbrother. Did Balon say aught to you of the succession? Aye, they had spoken in the sea tower, and the wind howled outside the windows, and the waves crashed restlessly below. Balon had shaken his head in despair when he heard what Aeron had to tell him of his last remaining son. The wolves have made a weakling of him, as I feared, the king had said. I pray God that they had killed him, so he cannot stand in Asha's way. That was Balon's blindness. He saw himself in his wild, headstrong daughter, and believed that she could succeed him. He was wrong in that, and Aeron tried to tell him so. No woman will ever rule the Ironborn. Not even a woman such as Asha, he insisted, but Balon could be deaf to things he did not wish to hear. Before the priest could answer, Gorold Goodbrother, the maester's mouth flapped open once again. By rights the sea stone chair belongs to Theon, or Asha if the prince is dead. That is the law. Greenland law, said Aeron with contempt. What is that to us? We are Ironborn, the sons of the sea, chosen of the drowned god. No woman may rule over us, nor any godless man. And Victarion? Asked Gorold Goodbrother. He has the Iron Fleet. Will Victarion make a claim, Damphair? Euron is the eldest brother, began the maester. Aeron silenced him with a look. In little fishing towns and great stone keeps alike, such a look from the Damphair would make maids feel faint and send children shrieking to their mothers, and it was more than sufficient to quell the chain-neck thrall. Euron is eldest, the priest said, but Victarion is more godly. Will it come to war between them? Asked the maester. Ironborn must not spill the blood of Ironborn, and that, of course, goes back to Galen Whitestaff, the first drowned priest, and potentially all the way back to the Grey King, who unified the Ironborn and is never said to have killed other Ironborn. Ironborn must not spill the blood of Ironborn. A pious sentiment, Damphair, said Goodbrother, but not one that your brother shares. He had Salwain Botley drowned for saying that the sea stone chair by rights belonged to Theon. If he was drowned, no blood was shed, said Aeron. Reminds you of the Dothraki thing in base Dothrak, like, oh, don't, Drogo had to kill Viserys without shedding blood, although I think the melting metal would have made him bleed. So let's see. If he drowned, no blood was shed, said Aeron. So he's thinking about the technicalities of drowning. The maester and the lord exchanged a look. Like, okay. I don't think that's what it means. It means not literally shedding blood, Damphair. It means don't kill each other. In all seriousness, why is Damphair drawing a difference between drowning someone, shedding their blood, or not? It could be because the best way to give someone to the sea is to drown them without shedding their blood. Then the deep ones can resurrect them as thralls. If you cut their throat and give them to the sea, you couldn't resurrect them quite the same way because they'd bleed out in the water and they'd be dead in a different way. That is potentially why Aeron has a belief that, like, drowning people without shedding their blood is important. I think that is it. But of course, he's taking the phrase literally, and it means don't kill it. That's why the other two, like, they exchanged a look like... Anyway, I must send word to Pike, and soon, said Gorold Goodbrother. Damphair, I would have your counsel. What shall it be, homage or defiance? So you can see, even though Good Brother smacked Aeron down, is like, hey, this is my castle. You can't kick the Maester out. Why did he call Damphair? To get his advice, because he knows that Damphair is an axis of political power on the Iron Islands, and what he says will be important. So Euron is claiming the throne, but he's like, I'm going to run this by Aeron Damphair before I decide what I'm doing exactly. So he's playing politics, and it just shows you how important Damphair is. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, so Asha thinks about, I need to die near the ocean so that my soul can find the watery halls. No, you need to die in the ocean so the squishers can literally claim you and take you to the watery halls. So again, everything on the Ironborn belief is describing the Deep One process. Someone's saying that if you look into the alternate meanings for words, a neck is what you get when lava hardens. That is interesting. I'll have to look that up. Okay, I would have your counsel. What shall it be? Aeron tugged his beard and thought, I have seen the storm, and its name is Euron Crow's Eye. For now, send only silence, he told the Lord. I must pray on this. Pray all you wish. Pray all you wish, the Maester said. It does not change the law. Theon is the rightful heir, and Asha next. Silence! Aeron roared. Too long have the Ironborn listened to you chain-necked maesters prating of the green lands and their laws. It is time we listen to the sea again. It is time we listen to the voice of God. His own voice rang in that smoky hall, so full of power that neither Gorald Goodbrother nor his maester dared a reply. The drowned god is with me, Aeron thought. He has shown me the way. Goodbrother offered him the comforts of the castle for the night. So, let's just review. Aeron obviously just got his back up here in this situation. But he's starting to get the idea. What should we do? Aeron's like, well, I've got to pray and the sea will tell me. And then he starts to get an idea. He's like, we need to listen to the sea again and just say F the maesters. And that will lead to the idea of the Kingsmoot. But he's so loud and crazy that the other two people in the room, Gorald Goodbrother and the Maester, who do not believe in the drowned god, neither one of them, they do not believe, okay? So to them, Aeron is a pious person of faith who believes in a religion that they don't, but they have to respect because he commands great political power. But he's obviously crazy. And it's not just that he takes the faith literally, the way that he acts is crazy. Like they're saying things that make sense, that are relevant. And he just gets louder. He's like, the drowned god, rah, rah, rah. And they're all just like, okay, guess there's not really any point in taking this conversation further. You know how it is. Like if someone's loud and crazy, like you kind of just you do the Homer Bushes thing, right? Like that's kind of what they both did. They're just like, all right, well, okay, I guess we'll wait for him to pray and figure out what he wants then. It's pretty insane. That's my point. And then he thinks, the drowned god is with me. I'm so powerful. I just blew the doors off their brains. Man. Okay. So Goodbrother offered him the comforts of the castle for the night, but the priest declined. He seldom slept beneath the castle roof and never so far from the sea. Comforts I shall know in the drowned god's watery halls, beneath the waves. We are born to suffer, that our suffering might make us strong. All that I require is a fresh horse to carry me to Pebbleton. That Goodbrother was pleased to provide. He sent his son Graydon as well to show the priest the shortest way through the hills down to the sea. Dawn was still an hour off when they set forth, but their mounts were hardy and sure-footed, and they made good time despite the darkness. So little sleep deprivation, throw that in the mix. Aeron closed his eyes and said a silent prayer, and after a while began to drowse in the saddle. The sound came softly, the scream of a rusted hinge. Uri, he muttered, and woke fearful. Sorry, Uri was murdered. That's Freudian. There is no hinge here, no door, no Uri. A flying axe took off half of Uri's hand when he was 10 and 4, playing at the finger dance whilst his father and his elder brothers were away at war. By the way, just to be clear, Euron Greyjoy was raping or sexually abusing, somewhere in between there, both Aeron and Uri. And then when Yuri got his hand chopped off, the maesters tried to heal him, and he was infected and he died. And Euron also killed the brother who had grayscale as well. So, just in case you didn't know, that's made extra clear in Damphair Winds of Winter chapter, but it was kind of already implied before then. So, he's a bad person. All right, by the time the mace, let's see. Yeah, Lord Quellen's, okay, so playing the finger dance, which again is dumb. They drink and then throw knives or try to catch them. That's dumb. Sometimes people's hands get chopped apart. So, Lord Quellen's third wife had been a piper of Pink Maiden Castle, a girl with big soft breasts and brown doe's eyes. Instead of healing Yuri's hand the old way with fire and seawater, she gave him to her Greenland maester, who swore that he could sew back the missing fingers. He did that, and later he used potions and poultices and herbs, but the hand mortified and Uri took a fever. By the time the maester sawed his arm off, it was too late. Lord Quellen never returned from his last voyage. The drowned god in his goodness granted him a death at sea. Again, more squisher, cold stuff. It was Lord Balin who came back with his brothers Euron and Victarion. When Balin heard what had befallen Yuri, he removed 3 of the maester's fingers with a cook's cleaver and sent his father's piper wife to sew them back on. Okay, so let's appreciate that Balin is a messed up individual too, because that's messed up. So the maester wasn't able to fix the hand, so he makes his stepmom, his father's new wife, sew fingers back on the maester, which she doesn't know how to sew fingers on. So this is just a macabre, is grotesque, cruel punishment that Balin is inflicting on both of these people. It's really messed up. It's one thing to torture the maester, but to do that also to your stepmom. Like, I know stepmoms can be a pain in the ass, dude. I know, but dude. Anyway, poultices and potions worked as well for the maester as they had for Uragon. He died raving, and Lord Quellen's third wife followed soon thereafter, as the midwife drew a stillborn daughter from her womb. So, you think maybe she was traumatized a little? She might have been she seems like she would have been pregnant when this happened. So, in the way of George Martin's horror, he gives you a horrible story and then reels out subsequent details which amplify the horror. So not only did she have to sew the fingers on, she soon died thereafter. Why? Because she had a stillborn daughter, because she was pregnant. It's very dark. Anyway, let's see. He died, as the midwife drew a stillborn daughter from her womb. Aeron had been glad. It had been his axe that sheared off Yuri's hand, whilst they danced the finger dance together, as friends and brothers will. It shamed him still to recall the years that followed Yuri's death. Oh, so, okay. At 6 and 10, he called himself a man, but in truth, he had been a sack of wine with legs. A little bit of trauma. Not only Aeron abused or raped by his brother, he also was playing the finger dance with his brother, Yuri, who he was the closest to. And then Yuri suffered a horrible accident and then died a horrible death. And Aeron blames himself. So then he turns to drinking. Very understandable. At 6 and 10, he called himself a man, but in truth, he had been a sack of wine with legs. He would sing, he would dance, but not the finger dance, never again. He would jape and jabber and make mock. So again, that's what a fool does. Makes mock. So George is describing Aeron exactly like a fool. Very consistently with motley and all the rest. He played the pipes. He juggled. He rode horses. He could drink more than all the winches and botleys and half the harlaws too. The drowned god gives every man a gift, even him. No man could piss longer or farther than Aeron Greyjoy, as he proved at every feast. So when you go to a Greyjoy feast, you just know at some point in the evening, Aeron's going to start pissing on stuff and challenging people. Like, that's who he is. Once he bet his new longship against a herd of goats that he could quench a hearth fire with no more than his cock. Aeron feasted on goat for for a year, and named his longship Golden Storm, though Balin threatened to hang him from her mast when he heard what sort of ram his brother proposed to mount on her prow. He was going to put a cock ram on the prow of the ship, guys. It's the kind of dude he was. So in the end, the Golden Storm went down off of Fair Isle. Not so fair anymore, are you? The Golden Storm went down. That's why they call him Damphair. During Balin's first rebellion, cut in half by a towering war galley called Fury, when Stannis Baratheon caught Victarion in his trap and smashed the Iron Fleet. Yet the god was not done with Aeron and carried him to shore. Some fishermen took him captive and marched him down to Lannisport in chains, and he spent the rest of the war in the bowels of Casterly Rock, proving that krakens can piss farther and longer than lions, boars, or chickens. So this is interesting. I originally thought there was only one drowning, but there's two. So this one, he's just lost at sea. He doesn't say that he was drowned. And when he's in chains, he's still the same person. So what is he doing in prison? He's still pissing on stuff and having contests. He's being the same dude. So he hasn't changed yet. Like, this is Balon Greyjoy's rebellion failed. His two nephews, Balon's oldest sons, died. Aeron, his ship destroyed, cast out at sea. Then he was spent weeks in prison in Casterly Rock, or Lannisport. No, Casterly Rock. So this should have been enough to change his attitude if it was just an emotional experience. Because the other one, there's nothing that happened except for he drowned. There's no other events around it. He just drowned. But then he comes out changed. That's because he actually drowned that time. So, he spent the war in the bowels of Casterly Rock, proving that krakens can piss farther than lions. That man is dead. Aeron had drowned and been reborn from the sea, the god's own prophet. No mortal man could frighten him, no more than the darkness could, nor memories, the bones of the soul, the sound of a door opening, the scream of a rusted hinge. Euron has come again. And again, that's Euron open. The whole rusted hinge thing is Euron opening the bedroom door. So that's the sound of his trauma. It did not matter. He was the Damphair priest, beloved of the god. So drowned and reborn from the sea. Again, it happened at a different time, but he's definitely thinking about it as a drowning. Will it come to war? Asked great and good brother as the sun was lightening the hills. That's the one that rode with him. A war of brother against brother. If the drowned god wills it, no godless man may sit the sea-stone chair. So this is interesting because there's a point in Ironborn history, right? The Grey King rules over all the Ironborn for 1,000 years, supposedly. Then when he dies, he has over 100 sons. They descend into an orgy of kinslaying, which, if that doesn't sound like a squisher sex and murder thing, I don't know what does. An orgy of kinslaying. Here it's implied. Brother may turn against brother if the drowned god wills it. Meaning, sometimes the deep ones might want their drowned priests and their tools on land to instigate a war of brothers. And that is exactly what happened when Grey King died. Over 100 brothers were reduced down to 16. Those are George Martin's words, not mine. An orgy of kinslaying. 16 brothers were left, and they divided up the Iron Islands. And then after that, the Kingsmoot comes along, and they start sharing power between the Rock and Salt Kings. Yeah, so who instigates orgies of kinslaying? The drowned god, which is the deep ones. It's right there. If the drowned god wills it, no godless man may sit the sea-stone chair. The Crow's Eye will fight, that is certain. No woman could defeat him, not even Asha. Women were made to fight their battles in the birthing bed. Just a little latent patriarchy there from the Damphair. And Theon, if he lived, was just as hopeless, a boy of sulks and smiles. At Winterfell he proved his worth, such that it was, but the Crow's Eye was no crippled boy. The decks of Euron's ship were painted red. Because remember, this is after they've gotten word of Theon's mutilation. The decks of Euron's ship were painted red, the better to hide the blood that soaked them. Victarion. The king must be Victarion, or the storm will slay us all. Graydon left him when the sun was up to take the news of Baelin's death to his cousins in their towers at down-delving Crowspike Keep and Corpse Lake. Aeron continued on alone, up hills and down vales along a stony track that drew wider and more traveled as he neared the sea. In every village he paused to preach, and in the yards of petty lords as well. We were born from the sea, and to the sea we all return, he told them. His voice was as deep as the ocean and thundered like the waves. The storm god in his wrath plucked Balin from his castle and cast him down, and now he feasts beneath the waves in the drowned god's watery halls. He raised his hands. Balin is dead. The king is dead. Yet a king will come again, for what is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger. A king will rise. Some of those who heard him threw down their hoes and picks to follow. So by the farming implements, fuck the hoes and picks. Give me the money and the weed. Threw down their hoes and picks to follow. So by the time he heard the crash of waves, I'm sorry, but that was funny. A dozen men walked behind his horse, touched by God and desirous of drowning. So he's got 12 new people that want to be drowned. It's good preaching. He's a good preacher. He is. Because he's the mouthpiece of the deep ones. It's very compelling. Pebbleton was home to several thousand fisher folk whose hovels huddled around the base of a square tower house with a turret at each corner. 200 of Aeron's drowned men there awaited him, camped along a gray sand beach in sealskin tents and shelters built of driftwood. So about 40. Their hands were roughened by brine, scarred by nets and lines, calloused from oars and picks and axes, but now those hands gripped driftwood cudgels hard as iron, for the god had armed them from his arsenal beneath the sea. So he's building a cult. These are people that used to have lives. They used to be fishermen or farmers or miners, and instead they've given up their former lives, just like the poor fellows and the warrior sons of the faith. These are people that gave up their life. They've joined a religious order. And so, yeah, that's what he's doing. He's just taking people. He's like, leave your life, come get drowned, be born again, become a holy man, sleep on the beach with me, carry around a driftwood thing, and I preach and y'all cheer, and we're going to get more people in the cult. What are we going to do? I don't know. We're just building a cult that lives by the sea and drowns people. So you kind of, yes, and Jesus' first followers were fishermen. Like I said, this is all weird Christianity on the Iron Islands. Absolutely. So yeah, the 12 men he gathered, sure, 12 disciples. I mean, the last hero's 12 companions are a 12 disciples reference. And a lot of that is tied to the Zodiac. Some people think the original story of Jesus and the 12 disciples or the 12 tribes of Israel have correlations to the Zodiac. That's an entirely different can of worms that we're not going to open. Deep ones will come. They like worms. And tuna. Don't open any of that stuff. So, yeah, he's building a cult. Purpose undefined. But we're definitely drowning people and believing in the deep ones' gods. So, basically, this is a deep one. You can see how the deep one agenda works. They control the priests, and the priests build a cult, and the cult involves drowning more people. So if I were to get more specific, I would say that just as the children of the forest are looking for green seers like Bran and Bloodraven to sit on their weirwood thrones, and just like the others are looking for, Jon Snow, the prince that was promised, either because he's a Stark or because he's a Stark Targaryen, the deep ones are probably looking for that good squisher DNA or skin changers, one or the other. They are probably looking for the right people. That's always part of that changeling baby stealing folklore, stealing the right babies. All right, so That's what the Thousand Islands women are doing when they file their teeth. They're making themselves attractive to the squishers. Chew on that. Okay, so it's true fact. True facts. So he's building a cult, and the deep ones are the ones that are telling him to do it. So I would guess that the goal is to keep drowning people, and perhaps the people with a sufficient amount of deep ones DNA are the ones that can be resurrected. Patchface comes from, was it Lys or Volantis? Hard to say. Maybe he's got some merfolk DNA. I mean, he is a strange person. He does magic and speaks 5 languages. I don't know. We have no idea. So he's building a cult, and it's about 40 deep. He just found 12 more. And whenever the deep ones want Aeron to do something, he's got a cult waiting to do his bidding. I do wonder, now, when we think about Aeron strapped to the front of Euron's chair, not chair, his boat. Sorry. Usually you're strapped tied to a chair. Not usually, but when villains take you captive, they tie you to a chair. So Aeron's tied to the boat, and he's potentially going to be sacrificed. But if Aeron has already been patch-faced and is already a tool of the deep ones, I kind of wonder how that's going to go. He very well may not die, or he may be collected by the deep ones and resurrected again, or maybe the deep ones will come and turn the tables on Euron in a way that he's not expecting because he is torturing their servant. Maybe the deep ones don't care about that, and that's all part of the plan, and they're controlling and suggesting things to Euron as well. It is hard to know, but I just want to point out that Euron being in the middle of that mess at Old Town is more interesting now because he might be somebody that the deep ones can pilot and activate. They had built a shelter for the priest just above the tide line. Hey Dave, Garth's bound to be with you, thank you. Question from Alex. If left to their own devices, what do you think the Greenland practices would spread or dwindle on the Iron Islands? Which culture wins in the end? Well, I definitely think the Ironborn culture is sustained by this Deep Ones cult, and that is why it is so stubborn, even though it doesn't work. And that's kind of what I was saying. The Ironborn are so backwards, just comically so. But that's because their culture has been steered by the Deep Ones. Look at the Thousand Islands people. They can't even talk anymore. I think that's what happens when you all get patch-faced. Patchface forgot how to talk, had to relearn. Okay? It said that. He forgot how to speak. So, like, the Thousand Islands people have been so farmed out by the Deep Ones that they are basically stupid. And there's a lesser effect happening on the Iron Islands, but that is why they are so brutish and backwards, even when it doesn't work. That's why. Some of them are literally brain damaged from being drowned as well. So they had built a shelter for the priest just above the tide line. Gladly he crawled into it after he had drowned his newest followers. So Aeron Damphair stays up all night after shouting down the good brother and the maester, rides all the way to Pebbleton, casually drowns and resuscitates 12 people. Then finally, he's like, I can get some sleep here in this, what was it? A shelter made of what? Driftwood and sealskin and stuff. Though his ride to Hammerhorn had left him weary, Aeron Damphair was restless in his driftwood shelter, roofed over with black weeds from the sea. The clouds rolled in to cloak the moon and stars, and the darkness lay as thick upon the sea as it did upon his soul. Balin favored Asha, the child of his body, but a woman cannot rule the Ironborn. It must be Victarion. 9 sons had been born from the loins of Cullen Greyjoy, and Victarion was the strongest of them, a bull of a man, fearless and dutiful. There's your papal bull, I guess. And therein lies our danger. A younger brother owes obedience to an elder, and Victarion was not a man to sail against tradition. He has no love for Euron, though, not since the woman died. And that's Victarion's wife. That's a whole different messed up story. And yes, Asha would have been a great ruler. It's very obviously we're supposed to notice that the Ironborn's sexism is robbing them of their best ruler in this generation. No question. So she actually wants to like evolve the Ironborn out of backwardsness. That's because she hasn't been drowned. Outside, beneath the snoring of his drowned men and the keening of the wind, he could hear the pounding of the waves, the hammer of his god calling him to battle. So just continues on and on. Every sound he hears, everything he does, it's all about the drowned gods. Aeron crept from his little shelter into the chill of the night. Naked he stood, pale and gaunt and tall, and naked he walked into the black salt sea. The water was icy cold, yet he did not flinch from his god's caress. Remember, Patchface's skin was clammy cold, so there may be something about being drowned and resurrected where you don't feel the cold as much. It's come up a few times. I mean, it's hard to go into cold water like that. That sucks. I mean, I guess people are doing the whole ice tank thing. So the water was icy cold, yet he did not flinch. A wave smashed against his chest, staggering him. The next broke over his head. He could taste the salt on his lips and feel the god around him, and his ears rang with the glory of his song. 9 sons were born from the loins of Kellen Greyjoy, and I was the least of them, as weak and frightened as a girl. But no longer, and I'm sorry, ladies, it's just the mind of the Ironborn. It's very patriarchal. That man is drowned, and the god has made me strong. The cold salt sea surrounded him, embraced him, reached down through his weak man's flesh, and touched his bones. Bones, he thought, the bones of the soul. Balin's bones and Yuri's. What do Yuri's bones have to do with anything? These are just dead people, I guess. He's just sort of free. This is total free. This is Squisher-induced inner monologue poetry jam. That's what, listen to this. Bones, he thought. The bones of the soul. What? The bones of the soul? What is that? Balin's bones and Yuri's. The truth is in our bones, for the flesh decays and the bone endures. And on the hill of Naga, the bones of the Grey King's Hall. It's just like, one thing reminds me of another. Bones remind me of death. Balin and Yuri died. Truth is in our bones. And that reminds me of Naga's Hill. It's just... Gaunt and pale and shivering, Aeron Damphair struggled back to the shore, a wiser man than he had been when he stepped into the sea, for he had found the answer in his bones, and the way was plain before him. The night was so cold that his body seemed to steam as he walked back towards his shelter, but there was a fire burning in his heart, and sleep came easily for once, unbroken by the scream of iron hinges. When he woke, the day was bright and windy. Aeron broke his fast on a broth of clams and seaweed cooked above a driftwood fire. No sooner had he finished than the Merlin descended from his tower house, with 6 guards to seek him out. The king is dead, the Damphair told him. Aye, I had a bird, and now another. The Merlin was a bald, round, fleshy man who styled himself lord in the manner of the Greenlands, and dressed in furs and velvets. One raven summons me to pike, another to 10 towers. You krakens have too many arms. You pull a man to pieces. What say you, priest? Where should I send my longships? All right, let's pause. The Merlin. Okay, so the Merlin, obviously, so some of the Ironborn use the old first man naming custom of saying the Spar, the Merlin, the this, okay? The Greyjoy. So when George uses that to make the phrase the Merlin, but it just makes it sound like the Merling, as if he's a creature without a name. The Merling descended from his tower house. I've just had a bird, and now another. So it sounds like the Merling has been eating birds, like, oh yeah, I just had one, then I had another, I was hungry. Why do Merlings live in towers? Well, because the Squishers built Moat Cailin and probably Pike, and the original Lords of Pike would have been Deep One hybrids, sitting on the Seastone chair, ruling over a bunch of drowned, thralled out Ironborn. That is what the original Iron Islands look like before the mariners got there. When the first men got there, ancient day, and the deep ones are farming people, that's what you'd have. You'd have a Merlin, meaning a half human, half deep one, up in the tower. He'd be coming down, talking about eating birds. The Merlin was a bald, round, fleshy man. That's exactly like the Manderleys and Biter. The Squishers don't have hair, as Nibbledick says. So he's bald and fleshy. One raven... Oh, and he's worried about being pulled apart by a kraken. So that's definitely a hybrid. Serving the kraken. And he's like, what should I do? You krakens, tell me what to do. It's like, I will do whatever you say, deep ones. Just tell me. Aeron scowled. 10 towers, do you say? Oh, 10 towers, do you say? What kraken calls you there? 10 towers was the seat of the Lord of Harlaw. The Princess Asha. She has set her sails for home. The reader sends out ravens, summoning all her friends to Harlaw. He says that Balin meant for her to sit the sea stone chair. The drowned god shall decide who sits the sea stone chair, the priest said. Kneel that I might bless you. Lord Merlin sank to his knees, and no first name being used, so it just heightens the idea that he's representing a Merling lord and not a person. Merlin sank to his knees, and not the individual in the scene, but rather a Merling. Aeron uncorked his skin and poured a stream of seawater over his bald pate. Lord God who drowned for us, let Meldred... Give me a translation on Meldred. I looked it up, actually, but I forget. Somebody get it for me. Meldred. I think it's a variation of Mildred, which has a meaning. Let Meldred, your servant, be born again from the sea. Bless him with salt, bless him with stone, bless him with steel. Water ran down Merlin's fat cheeks to soak his beard and fox fur mantle. What is dead may never die, Aeron finished, but rises again, harder and stronger. But when Merlin rose, he told him, stay and listen that you may spread God's word. Of course, a Merling would preach. Help him preach. 3 feet from the water's edge, the waves broke around a rounded granite boulder. It was there that Aeron Damphair stood, so all his school might see him and hear the words he had to say. So it sounds like a mystery school, like a cult. We were born from the sea, and to the sea we all return, he began, as he had 100 times before. I'm not sure if we'll see krakens. I kind of think so, yeah. I think a kraken we'll hear reports of them in the battle or something, but I don't think it'll be overly dramatic. Let's see. We were born from the sea, blah, blah, blah. The storm god in his wrath plucked Balin from his castle and cast him down, and now he feasts beneath the waves. He raised his hands. The Iron King is dead, yet a king will come again. For what is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger. So it sounds like he's saying that the dead king will come back out of the sea. And that's potentially what happened originally. Because the original kings of the Ironborn, probably would have been Squisher half-breeds, the Merlings that live in the towers. So, their kings did go into the sea and come back out of the sea again. A king shall rise, the drowned men cried. He shall, he must, but who? The Damphair listened a moment, but only the waves gave answer. Who shall be our king? The drowned men began to slam their driftwood cudgels one against the other. Damphair, they cried. Damphair king, Aeron king, give us Damphair. Aeron shook his head. If a father has 2 sons and gives one an axe, and to the other a net, which does he intend should be the warrior? The axe is for the warrior, Russ shouted back, and the net for the fisher of the seas. Aye, said Aeron, has smart cookie, that Russ. More like a school of fish. Oh, nice, James. It's right there. So Mildred can also mean gentle strength. What does it mean? What's the first one? Mild. It can mean, power or strength. Maybe it's mildew power and strength instead of mild. Meldred. It is changed. Could be a play on Mordred, perhaps. Meldred is a real-life historical figure that is also a villain to Merlin. Oh, isn't that Mordred? Or is there also a Meldred? This is you asking the chat questions. Yeah, you never know what's going to happen. Hey, I rely on you guys. Okay, I, said Aeron, the god took me deep beneath the waves and drowned the worthless thing that I was. When he cast me forth again, he gave me eyes to see and ears to hear and a voice to spread his word, that I might be his prophet and teach his truth to those who have forgotten. So all of that is very literally, George is just telling you over and over again what has happened. But we just discount it because it sounds like snarks and grumpkins. He has tricked us into doing the Maester routine. Everywhere else, when the Maesters are like, oh, but there's no children of the forest, that's not real. We're always like, ah, but it is real. We know it's real. But then we hear Aeron talking about all this shit under the sea, and we're sitting here going, snarks and grumpkins. No. The deep ones are under there. And let me just change God into deep ones. The deep ones took me deep beneath the waves and drowned the worthless thing that I was. When they cast me forth again, they gave me eyes to see, ears to hear, and a voice to spread their word, that I might be the deep one's prophet and teach their truth to those who have forgotten. I was not, like, that's my theory. That's it. It's brilliant. It's hidden in plain sight. That's why when it hit me, I was just like, holy, the Damphair was drowned. He was patch-faced. And that's why he hears stuff from the sea. Every idea comes from the sea. Everything he talks about is weird and symbolic and sort of disassociative and translated into sea language. Everything. His inner monologue, his speech, all of it. His rationalization of Balin's death. So this is an awesome theory. I hope you guys are enjoying it. It's wild that no one has ever thought of this, at least that I've heard of, and that it was sitting here this whole time and nobody ever thought, I never thought of it. Nobody thought of it. And I just was reading this stuff way too much and was just like, oh, wait a minute. What happened? I'll tell you how it started. I was writing this script about the Grey King. And I was saying, okay, so we've got the Maesterly narrative, and I'll interject Damphair's mad ravings. And I started as a joke. I started saying mad ravings in a different way. I said his squid-addled imagination, is, seaweeded out mind, things like that. And so I kept playing up the idea that he's crazy. And I was just thinking about it. I was like, man, he really is crazy. And then I read the little thing about him being drowned, and I was like, holy shit. Oh yeah, by the way, there's a Stannis parallel. Stannis watched Patchface drown, right? Then he later sailed over and drowned Aeron. Now that wasn't Aeron's deep one contact, because remember, his ship was broken up by Stannis' ship. Literally, Stannis' ship, Fury, broke up Aeron's ship, threw him into the sea, and then he washed ashore and was taken prisoner in Lannisport. Later, Aeron drowned. But there is that Stannis parallel with both sides, so that's interesting as well. And also, like I said, Golden Storm Lords. There's a lot of parallels and a lot of common language, all the fool language applied to Aeron, so that we can think of always his old life, foolish. So, I was not made to sit the sea stone chair, no more than Euron Crow's eye. For I have heard the god who says, no godless man may sit my sea stone chair, meaning no one who isn't touched by the deep ones should be a lord. And that's just what I said. The ancient lords of the Ironborn would have been deep one hybrids or deep one converts. So that's why he's like, no godless man can. It's weird how he says it over and over. No godless man can sit the sea stone chair. That's what it means. You have to be a squisher controlled person or a squisher hybrid to be an Ironborn king, because that's who's in charge. I was not made to sit upon the sea stone chair, no more than Euron Crow's Eye, for I have heard the god who says, no godless man may sit my sea stone chair. The Merlin crossed his arms against his chest. Is it Asha then, or Victarion? Tell us, priest. The drowned god will tell you, but not here. Aeron pointed at the Merlin's fat white face. Look not to me nor the laws of men, but to the sea. Raise your ships and unship your oars. Or raise your sails and unship your oars, my lord, and take yourself to Oldwick. You and all the captains and kings go not to Pike, to bow before the godless, nor to Harlaw, to consort with scheming women. Point your prow towards Oldwick, where stood the Grey King's Hall. In the name of the drowned god, I summon you. I summon all of you. Leave your halls and hovels, your castles and your keeps, and return to Naga's Hill, to make a king's moot. The Merlin gaped at him. A king's moot? There has not been a true king's moot in too long a time, Aeron cried in anguish. Yet in the dawn of days, the Ironborn chose their own kings, raising up the worthiest amongst them. The worthiest. The squishiest. It is time we return to the old way, for only that shall make us great again. It was a king's moot that chose Eurus Ironfoot for High King, and he placed a driftwood crown upon his brows. Oh, it was a king's moot that raised him up and placed a driftwood crown upon his brows. Silas Flatnose, Harag Hor, the old Kraken, the king's moot raised them all. And from this king's moot shall emerge a man to finish the work King Balin has begun and win us back our freedoms. I mean, it really is Trumpian, but go not to Pike, nor to the 10 towers of Harlaw, but to Old Wick, I say again, seek the hill of Naga and the bones of the Grey King's Hall, for in that holy place, when the moon has drowned and come again, we shall make ourselves a worthy king, a godly king. That language, we're going to make for ourselves a godly king? What is this, a squisher breeding program? He raised his bony hands on high again. Listen to the waves. Listen to the god. He's speaking to us, and he says, we shall have no king but from the king's moot. A roar went up at that, and the drowned men beat their cudgels one against the other. A king's moot, they shouted. A king's moot, a king's moot. No king but from the king's moot. And the clamor that they made was so thunderous that surely the Crow's Eye heard the shouts on Pike and the vile storm god in his cloudy hall. And Aeron Damphair knew that he had done well. So the Deep Ones, after you do what they want, they send you a wave of endorphins, dopamine. And you're like, oh yeah, I did it. So like when he comes back from the sea with the idea, then he can sleep. And now he's got the Deep Ones plan enacted. And he's like, oh, I feel really good about myself. It's the only time he feels good about himself. So yeah, it, like I said, you do this comparison and you're like, oh, okay, Damphair drowned. His personality totally changed, just like Patchface, except for Patchface was younger, he was dead longer, and doesn't have any sort of religious or cultural framework to back up and tether his insanity to. So his statements are just ignored or laughed at, and no one gets it. But Damphair is a little more together because people take him credibly and clap when he says weird shit. They're like, oh yeah, for sure. Imagine if Patchface was like, Nenimone, silver seaweed, and everyone was like, and under the sea, all the men are starfish, and everyone just agrees and intones it. Then Patchface would be like, oh, yeah, they get me, you know? But that's how crazy it is that the Ironborn follow these drowned priests like Aeron. He's mad, and he's telling you straight up that he's communicating the plans of the drowned god, which is the Deep Ones, and that we got to return to the watery halls. We got to give ourselves to the Deep Ones and come back. And this was a lot of fun. I definitely picked up some new stuff just reading through this chapter and looking at it with this lens. Like, oh, he literally is explaining the entire Deep Ones breeding program, more or less. the Merlin in the tower and the godless man on the chair. Like, this is pretty sick. I hope you've enjoyed this theory and this stream. And I think this worked really well, sort of presenting the theory and then reading. Thanks, you guys. Click that like button right now. I see it going up. Click, 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 click. That means you. Click it.